What if I told you humanity's most dangerous predator isn't some alien monster or prehistoric beast, but something we willingly invite into our homes? At the Galactic University of Xenobiology, one human student is about to prove that Earth's apex hunter has been hiding in plain sight all along. Professor Click surveyed his classroom with the comfortable air of someone who had published 14 definitive texts on predator behavior. His mandibles clicked softly as he adjusted his lectern, the sound echoing through the amphitheater-style room. Rows of alien students followed his movements with multi-lensed eyes, their various appendages taking notes on data pads. The air hummed with the low-frequency vibrations of concentrated learning. Then Jake Martinez raised his hand. Not the tentative gesture of a student seeking clarification, but the confident signal of someone about to rearrange reality. Professor Clicks acknowledged him with a slight tilt of his cephalic crown, expecting perhaps a question about ambush tactics or pack hierarchy. "What if I told you," Jake began, his voice carrying easily across the silent room, "that everything we've studied about predator efficiency is based on inferior models?" A soft ripple of disbelieving chitters moved through the class. Tentacles stilled. Antennae froze mid-twitch. Professor Click's ocular membranes narrowed. The galactic standard metrics have been established through 9 generations of peer-reviewed. Earth has the universe's most efficient land predator, Jake interrupted, leaning forward in his seat. Its success rate makes every species in your textbooks look like amateurs. The professor's exoskeleton actually audibly stiffened. Young human, the Vulcan shock beast maintains a 37% hunt success rate in optimal conditions. The Xylosian sandstalker achieves 42% under twin moons. What possible terrestrial creature could surpass these documented? "We keep them in our homes," Jake said, and the room went so quiet, you could hear the coolant system cycling 3 decks below. A dozen different alien respiratory systems either caught or accelerated. Several students instinctively pulled their limbs closer to their bodies. The Glornian student near the front Zabra raised a trembling tentacle. "You invite this efficiency into your dwellings?" Her vocal sac pulsed with alarm. "You live alongside such terror voluntarily?" Jake just smiled, that particular human expression that somehow conveyed both confidence and mild amusement at universal concern. "We call it domestication. They sleep on our furniture. We buy them toys." Professor Clicks made a sound like grinding pebbles. "This is either magnificent foolishness or revolutionary science. You realize the burden of proof rests entirely upon you? Bring it to class tomorrow," Jake said. "The actual predator. You can run your own metrics." The professor's antennae twitched in what might have been excitement or profound academic distress. "Very well. We shall convene here at 3rd rotation. Security protocols will be observed. Recording equipment calibrated." He looked at Jake with what passed for sternness across species lines. This best not be some human prank. But the classroom atmosphere had already shifted from orderly lecture to something charged and uneasy. Students exchanged glances that needed no translation. They'd come to study predators from a safe academic distance, not contemplate sharing living space with perfection. Jake simply nodded and gathered his things, as casual as if he'd just arranged to borrow a textbook rather than challenge Galactic Xenobiology's fundamental assumptions. Word of the predator demonstration traveled through the university's communication networks with the speed and quiet intensity of a silent alarm. By 1st rotation the next morning, you couldn't walk 3 steps without overhearing a whispered theory or half-panicked question. The student forums lit up with speculation, some thoughtful, most frantic. Rumors layered upon rumors until the story had inflated to include armored plating, venom sacs, and psychic hunting capabilities. Down in the security office, things got serious fast. Teams began unpacking equipment that hadn't seen light in decades. Containment field generators were wheeled into the lecture hall's perimeter, humming with readiness. Tranquilizer rifles were checked and rechecked, their chemical payloads calibrated for large aggressive fauna. Nobody was taking chances with an unknown Earth predator, especially one a human called the most efficient. The faculty lounge became an impromptu war room. Professors from xenobiology, physics, even theoretical mathematics clustered around display screens, pulling up Earth's ecological databases. You had a Lorvian ecologist arguing planetary adaptation theory, with a Krelak physicist who kept calculating potential energy output based on jaw size. One elderly professor muttered about Terran grizzly bears, while his tentacles scrolled through images of large mammals, his eye stalks twitching with concern. Dean Walbos observed it all from his office. 4 of his 6 eyes narrowed in thought, the other 2 monitoring live feeds from the lecture hall. His mandibles worked slowly. Activating campus-wide emergency protocols was not done lightly. The last time had been during a lab breach involving self-replicating crystals. That had taken weeks to clean up. Meanwhile, the betting pool among graduate students reached absurd levels. Wagers were placed on everything from a bioengineered horror to a resurrected prehistoric creature. The odds on Space Dragon were surprisingly good for about an hour. Someone even jokingly put 5 credits on Entropy Entity, which got a few nervous laughs. You could feel the tension building like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Corridors usually filled with chatting students fell quiet. Everyone moved with purpose or stood clustered in nervous groups. The university hadn't felt this collectively anxious since the last accreditation review. Emergency lighting systems were tested campus-wide. Automated announcements reminded everyone to stay clear of the xenobiology wing unless authorized. For the first time in decades, the whole university mobilized not for a drill, but for a real, unpredictable event. All this over one student's claim. All this preparation, this investment of time and tech and anxiety because a human said he could bring proof that Earth had perfected predation. The sheer scale of the response highlighted how seriously the galaxy takes the unknown, especially when it comes from a species known for casual daring. The stage was set. The players were ready, and the entire campus held its breath, waiting for a predator that had to be a monster. Anything less would be, well, it would be embarrassing, really. After all this, it had to be worth the panic. The lecture hall doors hissed open at exactly 3rd rotation. Every eye sensor and recording device focused on the entrance. The containment field generators hummed at standby frequency. Security teams stood ready with tranquilizer. Rifles aimed at the threshold. Jake Martinez walked in, pushing a simple plastic pet carrier on a luggage cart. It was the kind of carrier you might use for a small dog or a large rabbit. Blue plastic, ventilation grills on the sides, a simple latch. It rolled across the polished floor with a soft whirring sound. Professor Click's mandibles actually dropped open. His antennae stiffened in confusion. He gestured at the humming containment field equipment, then at the utterly ordinary carrier. Where are the proper containment units? The reinforced shielding? The biometric monitoring arrays? Jake patted the carrier's roof. Everything we need is right here, Professor. The alien students leaned forward in unison. A dozen different sensory systems focused on the plastic box. Eye stalks extended, auditory membranes strained, thermal sensors scanned for heat signatures. The silence stretched. Then Zabra's voice cut through the tension from the 3rd row. Is that just a standard pet transport container? Jake smiled that particular human smile. Yes. Exactly what it looks like. The tension in the room didn't just break. It shattered into a million confused pieces. A wave of disappointed clicks and puzzled murmurs rippled through the audience. Security teams lowered their weapons slowly, looking at each other in confusion. The humming containment fields powered down with a defeated sigh. Jake unlatched the carrier door. It swung open without ceremony. Mittens emerged. Orange, fluffy, utterly unconcerned by the array of alien life forms staring at her. She blinked slowly in the lecture hall lights, then stretched, extending her front paws forward and arching her back in that classic feline morning routine. Her fur caught the light, highlighting patches of cream and darker orange. Her tail gave a casual flick as she surveyed the room. No fangs bared, no claws extended, no predatory glare. She looked like she'd just woken from a nap and was mildly curious about the change of scenery. Professor Clicks made a sound like a malfunctioning data port. This is your ultimate predator? This small fur-bearing creature? Mittens sat down and began cleaning one paw, completely ignoring the professor's existential crisis. Her tongue made soft rasping sounds against her fur. She might have been in a sunbeam back on Earth rather than the center of a galactic academic showdown. The security team leader actually holstered his weapon with an audible click of frustration. Several students began putting away their recording devices. The betting pool across campus was about to experience the largest collective loss in university history. Jake watched Mittens with apparent pride as she completed her paw cleaning and regarded the room with half-lidded eyes. The most dangerous, land predator in the known universe had arrived, and she looked like she might take another nap. Jake pulled up a holographic display while Mittens found a patch of light near the lectern and settled into it. She curled into a soft orange circle, completely at ease as data streams began flowing through the air. The contrast couldn't have been sharper, fluffy domesticity beside hard numbers. The galactic average hunt success rate for land predators, Jake began, sits between 20 and 30%. That's the established scientific consensus across 14 major studies. He let that hang in the air for a moment. The Vulcan shock beast you all admire? 37% on a good day. The Xylosian sandstalker? 42 under perfect conditions. A soft murmur moved through the room. Tentacles twitched. Eye stalks retracted slightly. These were the gold standards of predation they'd studied for cycles. Then Jake tapped the display. Housecats maintain a 96% success rate when hunting seriously. The room went completely still. Not the quiet of boredom, but the silence of cognitive shock. Several students' chromatophores actually flickered with stress patterns. Sabra's tentacles coiled tightly around her datapad. When a cat decides something needs to die, Jake continued, his voice calm and matter-of-fact, it dies. Not sometimes. Not under ideal circumstances. 96% of the time. Professor Clicks made a soft clicking sound deep in his thorax. His antennae angled toward the display as if trying to find an error in the data. That's statistically improbable, biologically unreasonable. Jake nodded. Yet verified across multiple terrestrial studies. Your impressive alien predators spend energy chasing, battling, struggling. They fail more often than they succeed. Cats don't chase. They don't struggle. They execute. He brought up comparison footage. A Vulcan shock beast roaring and charging across a landscape, missing its prey twice before a successful pounce. A Xylosian sandstalker expending tremendous energy in a prolonged duel with an armored grazer. Then he showed a cat. Still. Patient. A flicker of movement. Success. Efficiency isn't about size or noise, Jake said. It's about calibration, precision. These animals, he gestured at the alien predators, are sledgehammers. This, he pointed at Mittens, is a scalpel. Mittens chose that moment to stretch, extending her front paws and arching her back in a slow, luxurious movement. She yawned, showing a brief glimpse of needle-sharp teeth before settling back into her sunbeam. Completely unaware that she was dismantling 5 generations of xenobiological theory, Professor Clicks found himself taking notes despite himself. His mandibles moved silently as he calculated energy expenditure ratios. The numbers didn't lie. The efficiency was terrifying. Cold data proved more frightening than any appearance could be. A monster you could see coming was one thing. Perfection you couldn't see until it was too late. That changed everything. The paradigm didn't just shift. It shattered. Jake let the statistical silence hang in the air for another moment, then turned his attention to Mittens, who was now thoroughly occupied with washing her face with one damp paw. Look at her paws, he said, his voice dropping into that calm, explanatory tone that made everything sound both ordinary and extraordinary. Just soft little cushions. Harmless, right? He walked over and knelt beside her. Mittens paused her, washing to blink slowly at him, then went back to her task, completely unconcerned by the dozens of alien eyes watching her. Jake made a small, deliberate gesture, a quick scratch behind her ear combined with a subtle pressure point known to every cat owner. Mittens extended her claws. 18 retractable blades emerged from the fluffy orange paws. They weren't dramatic, weren't metallic, didn't gleam. They were just there, curved, sharp, and absolutely businesslike. The reaction was immediate and universal. A collective inhalation. Tentacles recoiled, eye stalks retracted. Several students actually pushed back in their seats. The security team, which had been standing down, suddenly looked at their tranquilizer rifles with fresh doubt. 18 individual surgical instruments, Jake said, his tone still conversational, as if discussing the weather. Each one retractable, curved to optimize slicing efficiency, and kept razor-sharp through natural honing behaviors. They're not for show. They're precision tools. He described how the claws could extend or retract in milliseconds, how their curvature allowed for maximum tissue damage with minimum effort, how they could anchor a cat to prey or terrain without compromising mobility. He used terms like elastic ligament mechanism and digital flexor tendons, but the clinical language only made it more unsettling. Professor Clicks found himself taking notes despite himself. His mandibles moved silently as he sketched the claw structure on his datapad. The biological engineering was elegant, terribly elegant. Most predators have obvious weapons, Jake continued. Fangs, horns, talons. They advertise their danger. Cats conceal theirs until the precise moment they're needed. He gestured at Mittens, who was now examining her extended claws with apparent satisfaction, before retracting them with a series of soft clicks. The blades vanished. The paws were just paws again. Fluffy, harmless looking. Mittens went back to washing her face as if nothing had happened. The classroom remained silent. The shift had been too sudden, too complete. One moment, soft domestic animal. The next biological weapon system. Then soft domestic animal again. Zabra's tentacles uncurled slowly. They hide their weapons? Until they need them, Jake confirmed. Which is why appearance means nothing when assessing predators. The most dangerous ones don't need to look dangerous. They just need to be effective. Professor Clicks made a note in the margin of his datapad. Concealed armament. Strategic deployment. Maximum efficiency with minimal telegraphing. He looked at Mittens with new respect. The fluffy exterior wasn't deception. It was packaging. Danger, it turned out, didn't need dramatic presentation. It could hide in something that looked like it belonged on a cushion. The most efficient weapons were the ones your prey never saw coming until it was far too late. Jake let the implications of concealed weaponry settle over the classroom before shifting to another evolutionary advantage. Most predators operate on shifts, he began, gesturing toward the holographic display that now showed a comparison of ocular structures. Day hunters, night hunters, they're specialists. Cats work the night shift without missing a day shift. He pulled up a light absorption chart. Human vision needs about 8 times more light to see what a cat sees clearly. Mittens here could navigate this room with just the emergency lighting. You'd be stumbling into chairs. The display shifted to a cross-section of feline eye anatomy. Jake pointed to the tapetum lucidum layer. This acts like a biological light amplifier. Photons that pass through the retina get reflected back for a second processing chance. It's why their eyes seem to glow in low light. You're seeing reflected light that would otherwise be wasted. Several students with poor night vision instinctively shifted in their seats. A Krelak from a daylight-rich planet actually shuddered, his photosensitive skin paling slightly. The tactical advantage was immediately apparent to species who relied on artificial lighting or limited their activities to specific photo periods. Your impressive alien predators? Jake continued. The Volgan shockbeast can't hunt during its planet's 40-hour nights. The Zelosian sandstalker shuts down completely in darkness. They're prisoners of their own evolutionary specializations. As if on cue, Mittens' pupils dilated dramatically, expanding from vertical slits to near-perfect circles that seemed to absorb the room's ambient light. She wasn't reacting to anything specific, just demonstrating the plasticity of feline vision as the holographic display cast, shifting patterns across the lecture. Hall Professor Clicks made a soft clicking sound of realization. Around-the-clock operational capacity. No environmental limitations. They don't need to adapt their hunting schedule to light conditions. They simply adjust their visual parameters. The evolutionary perfection became uncomfortably clear. While other predators had developed brute strength or massive size to compensate for their limitations, cats had refined something far more versatile. Biological night vision technology that required no external equipment, no energy expenditure beyond normal metabolic function, and no learning curve. Jake let the image of Mittens' fully dilated pupils hang in the air. Night doesn't limit them. It enables them. While diurnal predators sleep and nocturnal specialists hide from daylight, cats hunt whenever they want. Prey is never safe because the hunter never clocks out. The implications settled over the room. A predator that could see in near darkness meant no time was safe. No shadow offered protection. The universe had plenty of creatures that roared and charged in daylight, but far fewer that moved with silent precision through darkness. Mittens' pupils contracted back to slits as she turned her head toward a flickering light on the security console. The adjustment was instantaneous, seamless. No squinting. No adaptation period. Just perfect visual acuity regardless of lighting conditions. This wasn't just another predator adaptation. It was a fundamental rewriting of the rules of engagement. Daylight hunters could be avoided. Nocturnal specialists could be anticipated. But a creature that operated with equal efficiency in both realms? That changed the entire predator-prey dynamic. The night wasn't a barrier. It was just another hunting ground. Jake let the optical advantages settle into the classroom's collective consciousness before shifting to hunting methodology. Chasing prey wastes energy, he said, his tone matter-of-fact. Running after something that might escape? Inefficient. Cats don't chase, they calculate. As if cued by some silent director, Mittens rose from her sunbeam and froze into a hunting crouch. Her body went still in that particular feline way, every muscle engaged yet motionless. Only the very tip of her orange tail twitched, a tiny metronome of predatory focus. The classroom watched, utterly captivated. Data pads were forgotten, tentacles hung suspended mid-gesture. Even the security team lowered their weapons slightly, drawn into the demonstration. Zero energy expenditure until the precise moment of engagement, Jake explained, his voice dropping to match the new stillness in the room. No wasted movement, no premature exertion, just perfect readiness. Alien students glanced at each other, their own species' hunting methods suddenly seeming clumsy by comparison. The Glornian pack coordination that required complex communication. The Krelak energy-intensive aerial dives. The Volgan thunderous charges that shook the ground. All required tremendous effort with no guaranteed payoff. Mittens remained frozen, her eyes locked on some imaginary point across the room. Her breathing had slowed to nearly imperceptible. The twitching tail tip became the only movement in her entire body, a tiny betrayal of the intense concentration beneath the stillness. Professor Click's mandibles parted slightly. Textbook ambush predator behavior, but refined to perfection. The energy conservation is remarkable. Jake nodded without taking his eyes off Mittens. Your shock beast burned enough calories in one failed chase to power a small settlement. Mittens here could maintain this position for hours without significant metabolic cost. Waiting. Watching. Letting the prey make the first move, or the last mistake. Every movement was calculated. Her hind legs were coiled like springs. Her front paws were positioned for immediate traction. Her whiskers were angled forward, gathering minute air currents. She wasn't just waiting, she was processing. Computing trajectories. Estimating distances. Refining her approach based on imaginary variables. The silence in the lecture hall became something tangible. You could hear the faint hum of the holographic display, the soft respiratory sounds of a dozen different species, the nearly inaudible rustle of Mittens' fur as she made microscopic adjustments to her stance. Then Jake delivered the key insight. They don't overcome prey through superior strength or speed. They win through superior patience. The prey eventually makes a mistake, moves into range, reveals an opening, and that's when Mittens' muscles tensed almost imperceptibly. The promise of explosive action hung in the air, though she remained perfectly still. The tension was somehow more frightening than any actual movement could have been. The efficiency of patience over power became terrifyingly clear. A predator that could wait indefinitely for the perfect moment wasn't just patient, it was inevitable. The 96% success rate suddenly made perfect, horrifying sense. When you never strike until victory is mathematically certain, you rarely miss. This methodology explained everything: the concealed weapons, the night vision, the statistical dominance. It all served one purpose: maximum efficiency through minimal effort. Why waste energy chasing when you could let dinner come to you? Mittens finally broke her stance, rising and stretching as if she'd just decided the demonstration was complete. The sudden return to normal movement made several students jump. The transition from perfect stillness to casual movement was almost as startling as the hunt posture itself. The predator didn't need to be dramatic. It just needed to be effective. And effectiveness, it turned out, looked a lot like patience. Jake let the physics of predation settle into the academic silence before introducing the psychological dimension. Now consider this: most predators hunt when hungry. They stop when full. Cats hunt because they can. He let that distinction hang in the air, watching alien faces process the implication. The concept of surplus killing landed with the subtlety of a seismic event. Tentacles coiled tighter, chromatophores flickered with stress patterns. A Krelak student actually raised a protective wing case over his torso. You mean they kill beyond nutritional requirements? Zabra's vocal sac pulsed with disbelief. For no survival purpose? For practice, Jake clarified, his tone neutral. Skill maintenance. They'll hunt well fed. They'll hunt bored. The activity itself provides its own reward. As if on cue, Mittens began tracking something invisible near the lecture hall's ventilation duct. Her head moved with that slow, precise motion that suggested complete focus on nothing at all. Her tail tip twitched in rhythmic pulses. The intensity of her attention on empty air was somehow more disturbing than if she'd been staring at actual prey. Professor Clicks made a soft clicking sound deep in his thorax. Evolutionary advantage through constant rehearsal. The neural pathways remain sharp. Muscle memory maintains peak condition. He sounded both horrified and fascinated. They practice killing like musicians practice scales. Jake nodded. This is actually why humans first welcomed them into our homes. Ancient storage facilities, food caches, rodent problems. Cats didn't just hunt for themselves, they hunted for us, and they never clocked out. A cat that kills 10 mice when only one was needed is still a net positive for grain preservation. The psychological aspect clearly disturbed the audience. A Vulcan student shifted uneasily, his carapace making soft grating sounds. His species only hunted during mating season, and only enough to sustain the reproductive cycle. The concept of hunting for pleasure seemed almost obscene. Alien species who viewed predation as purely utilitarian, a necessary, grim transaction between life and death, found this casual approach to killing deeply unsettling. Hunting for fun suggested a relationship with mortality that felt alien. Wrong, even. Mittens suddenly pounced at the empty space near the duct, landing with silent precision on exactly nothing. She sniffed the spot, then sat back up as if satisfied with her imaginary kill. The entire performance lasted 3 seconds. Flawless execution against non-existent prey. The classroom watched in silence. The efficiency was terrifying because it was so detached from need. This wasn't hunger-driving action. This was programming expressing itself through perfect form. Jake let them sit with that discomfort. Efficiency becomes its own reward. The 96% success rate isn't just about feeding. It's about maintaining a biological standard of excellence. They don't hunt because they have to. They hunt because they're good at it. The revelation changed everything about how they viewed predator-prey relationships. Survival hunting made sense within ecological balance. Practice hunting suggested something else entirely. A creature so optimized for killing that the act became self-justifying. Predation wasn't just a means to an end. For cats, it was an expression of identity. The most efficient killer in the universe didn't need a reason to hunt beyond the simple fact that it could. The theory was solid, the statistics compelling, but classroom education only goes so far. Reality arrived when Mittens noticed Zabra's tentacles. The Glornian student had been nervously waving them throughout the demonstration. A subconscious gesture of anxiety she'd probably made since childhood. To Mittens, they looked like practice. Her entire body went still except for her eyes. Those pupils locked onto the moving appendages with terrifying focus. The lecture hall grew so quiet you could hear the ventilation system cycling 3 decks below. Every alien in the room instinctively stilled their own limbs, suddenly hyper-aware of any movement. Jake kept talking, his voice calm amid the building tension. Notice how she's not chasing, not even following the movement with her whole body, just the eyes. Minimal energy expenditure, maximum information gathering. He might have been discussing weather patterns rather than an imminent demonstration of predation. Professor Clicks found himself narrating like he was commentating a nature documentary. The hindquarters are coiling, weight shifting to the rear paws, preparing for explosive forward motion. His scientific detachment sounded increasingly strained as Mittens' muscles tightened beneath her fluffy exterior. She became a living spring, compressed and ready. The classroom held its collective breath. Security teams tightened their grips on tranquilizer rifles but didn't intervene. This was still technically a demonstration, not an attack. The pounce happened faster than most sensory systems could process. One moment complete stillness, then a blur of orange motion. No warning growl. No preparation shift. Just instantaneous acceleration from 0 to lethal. Zabra yelped, a high-pitched sound of pure surprise, as Mittens landed directly in front of her. But the attack never came. Instead of claws and teeth, Mittens simply reached out one paw and tapped the still waving tentacle with soft precision. Just a gentle tap. Like testing surface tension, she didn't dig in her claws, didn't attempt to bite. Just made contact and immediately sat back, looking up at Zabra with what might have been curiosity. Or perhaps feline satisfaction at a successful practice run. The entire sequence lasted maybe 2 seconds. Perfectly controlled. Utterly terrifying in its precision. Mittens had demonstrated the entire ambush sequence, target acquisition, approach, engagement, without actually harming anyone. She'd shown the difference between capability and intention. Zabra's tentacles recoiled and wrapped tightly around her torso. Her chromatophores flickered through several stress patterns before settling on a pale, shocked hue. She looked from Mittens to Jake to her own appendages as if seeing them for the first time. Jake nodded, apparently satisfied. That's the difference between theory and practice. The numbers tell you what's possible. The demonstration shows you how it works. He didn't apologize for the scare, didn't make comforting gestures. Just let the experience speak for itself. Professor Clicks made a note on his datapad, his mandibles moving silently. Controlled demonstration of predatory sequencing without actual aggression. The restraint suggests advanced cognitive processing. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as document the event. Theory had become practice in the most memorable way possible. Nobody in that room would ever look at a moving object the same way again. They'd all felt, for 2 seconds, what it was like to be designated practice prey by the universe's most efficient hunter, and they'd survived to appreciate the educational value. Mittens, completely unconcerned by the emotional impact she'd just caused, began washing her paw as if removing imaginary tentacle residue. The transition from lethal hunter to fastidious groomer was almost as startling as the pounce itself. Mittens completed her tentacle inspection with apparent satisfaction and turned her attention to the rest of the classroom. The single demonstration had apparently sparked something. The lecture hall was no longer just a place of learning. It had become an environment full of potential testing subjects. Her pupils dilated slightly as she scanned the room with renewed interest. She moved first toward Blep, the crystalline being whose faceted surface reflected light in intriguing patterns. Mittens approached with that slow, deliberate stalk, her body low to the ground. Blep's crystalline structure emitted a soft, nervous hum as she drew nearer. Then, with one careful paw, Mittens tapped gently on Blep's surface. The contact produced a series of faint musical chimes that echoed in the silent room. She tapped again, this time with claws slightly extended, creating a different tonal quality. It wasn't aggressive, just curious. Scientific, even. Blep remained perfectly still, emitting a higher-pitched harmonic frequency that suggested either distress or fascination. Professor Clicks found himself next on her itinerary. She circled his lectern, her tail brushing against his exoskeleton. Her eyes locked onto his constantly twitching antennae with deep fascination. He attempted to maintain his academic composure, but his mandibles clicked nervously as she rose onto her hind legs to better examine the moving appendages. Note the subject's interest in rhythmic movement patterns, he muttered into his recorder, though his voice noticeably wavered when Mittens' paw came within centimeters of his face. She didn't actually touch him, just observed with that intense predatory focus that felt more invasive than physical contact. Outside the lecture hall, the security team monitored through the transparent walls. Their weapons remained ready but not raised. The team leader made a quiet gesture to hold position. This was still technically under control, however chaotic it appeared. They'd been briefed on Earth felines now, and the briefing had been enlightening. Jake continued his commentary as if this were all part of the lesson plan. Observe how she categorizes each potential subject differently. The crystalline being gets acoustic testing. The professor gets visual tracking practice. She's not just hunting, she's data gathering. His calm narration contrasted sharply with the rising panic in the room. The boundary between education and live demonstration had completely dissolved. Mittens moved systematically from student to student. A furry Krelak received a gentle nibble test on its wing case. A gelatinous species from Hydros IV jiggled nervously as she batted gently at its surface tension. She adapted her approach for each biological type, treating the entire classroom like an interactive predator enrichment exhibit. The theoretical had become uncomfortably personal. Every student in that room experienced what it felt like to be assessed as potential prey by a perfect hunting machine. They'd all read about predator-prey dynamics in textbooks, but now they felt it. The instinctive freeze response, the elevated heart rates, the desperate hope that you wouldn't be the one selected for further study. When Mittens finally completed her circuit of the room, she sat back down near Jake's feet and began washing her face again, as if she'd just finished a routine inspection rather than terrorizing an entire xenobiology class. The sudden return to mundane behavior was almost as unsettling as the hunting behavior itself. The demonstration was over. The lesson had been learned through experience rather than lecture. Every being in that room now understood predation on a cellular level, not as academic theory but as immediate, personal reality. Mittens completed her circuit of the classroom and padded back to the sunbeam near the lectern, as if concluding a routine inspection. The transition was so abrupt it left cognitive whiplash in its wake. One moment she'd been a methodical predator assessing live subjects. The next she was just a housecat arranging herself comfortably in a patch of light. The classroom remained frozen. Tentacles stayed coiled. Respiratory systems operated at minimal capacity. Every being watched her, waiting for the next pounce, the next demonstration of lethal capability. It didn't come. Instead, Mittens began grooming herself. Her tongue made soft rasping sounds against her orange fur. She licked a paw and wiped it over her ear with the precise economical movements of a creature completely at ease. The casual return to normalcy was somehow more frightening than the hunting behavior had been. At least the hunting made sense within predator parameters. This peaceful self-maintenance felt like a mask that could drop at any second. Professor Clix's mandibles moved silently as he observed the shift. "She chooses to stop," he murmured, more to himself than the class. The energy conservation extends beyond hunting into psychological strategy. Why waste effort when objectives are met? His antennae twitched as he made notes on his datapad. The predator that controls its instincts is more dangerous than one ruled by them. Jake nodded, his expression neutral. Efficiency isn't just about action. It's about appropriate inaction. They don't hunt endlessly because that would be wasteful. They hunt precisely, then stop. He gestured toward Mittens, who was now thoroughly engaged in cleaning between her toes. The most effective predators understand timing. When to move. When to rest. When to conserve resources for actual opportunities rather than expending them on pointless shows of force. The contrast between what they'd just witnessed and what they were seeing now was staggering. The creature that had moved with lethal precision moments earlier was now thoroughly occupied with personal hygiene. The same paws that had extended 18 surgical blades were now being meticulously licked clean. The eyes that had tracked movement with terrifying focus were now half closed in apparent contentment. Outside the lecture hall, the security team lowered their weapons completely. Their team leader made a confused gesture toward the suddenly peaceful scene. Containment fields powered down with soft sighs of released energy. The tranquilizer rifles were reholstered with audible clicks of uncertainty. They'd been prepared for a monster. They hadn't been prepared for a creature that could turn predation on and off like a switch. The resolution settled over the room with uncomfortable clarity. A predator that could choose not to hunt was more advanced than one that hunted constantly. The self-control demonstrated higher cognitive function than mere instinct. Mittens hadn't stopped because she was tired or full. She'd stopped because the demonstration was complete. The practice was sufficient. The lesson had been delivered. This selective predation demonstrated something far more sophisticated than they'd anticipated. It wasn't just biological programming, it was calculated behavior. The ability to assess a situation, execute necessary actions, then disengage without lingering aggression, suggested predatory intelligence operating on a level most species hadn't considered possible. The most dangerous hunter wasn't the one that constantly showed its teeth. It was the one that knew exactly when to bare them and when to simply take a nap. Professor Clicks surveyed the aftermath with new eyes. The classroom looked like it had survived a minor disaster. Disarranged seating, scattered data pads, students still clutching each other's appendages for comfort. But the professor wasn't seeing chaos anymore. He was seeing data. Raw, unfiltered, revolutionary data that contradicted 14 published texts and 9 generations of established xenobiological theory. His mandibles moved silently as he accessed his curriculum files. The familiar lesson plans on predator efficiency suddenly looked embarrassingly naive. The Volgan Shockbeast chapter needed complete revision. The Xylosian Sandstalker analysis required fundamental recalibration. Everything he'd taught about what constituted advanced predation was incomplete. Inadequate, even. He made the concession quietly, without drama. The demonstration yielded unexpected educational value. His antennae twitched as he began marking entire sections for deletion. Curriculum revisions will commence immediately. The words landed with the weight of academic surrender. A professor who'd spent cycles building his reputation now had to dismantle it, piece by piece, because of one orange housecat. Around the room, students began processing what they'd witnessed. Tentacles uncoiled slowly. Data pads were retrieved from where they'd been dropped. The discussion started quietly at first, then grew in intensity. They weren't talking about predator classification systems anymore. They were talking about Earth, about humanity, about what kind of species would domesticate such efficient killers and call them pets. The efficiency paradox redefined everything. Size meant nothing. Appearance meant nothing. Their entire concept of advanced predation had been based on dramatic displays of power, not quiet perfection of technique. A creature that could achieve 96% success rates while looking like a stuffed toy forced them to reconsider every assumption about biological superiority. Jake's methods, though thoroughly unorthodox, proved scientifically valid. The chaos had been educational. The panic had been informative. The university administration, monitoring from Dean Walbos's office, acknowledged the unusual nature of the event while conceding its academic merit. Sometimes revolutionary science arrived neatly packaged with charts and citations. Sometimes it arrived in a pet carrier with retractable claws. Galactic xenobiology would never be the same. Textbooks needed new chapters. Research required new parameters. The field would now have to account for human domesticated predators, creatures refined through coevolution rather than natural selection alone. The human-feline relationship represented a completely new evolutionary strategy that nobody had considered before. One classroom demonstration had accomplished what years of academic debate could not. It had forced the entire field to reconsider its fundamental concepts. Predation wasn't about size or strength or obvious weaponry. It was about efficiency, precision, patience, and sometimes it came in packages so ordinary-looking that nobody saw the danger until it was far too late. Professor Clicks continued making notes, his earlier skepticism replaced by focused curiosity. The academic paradigm hadn't just shifted, it had been completely upended by 20 minutes of controlled chaos and one supremely unconcerned feline. Galactic science would now have to expand its definitions, its parameters, its very understanding of what made a predator truly advanced, and it would have to do it while accounting for the fact that humans considered such perfection suitable for household companionship. Dean Walbos addressed the university faculty assembly with the weary air of an administrator who'd just authorized emergency protocols for a housecat. His multiple eyes scanned the assembled professors, security personnel, and department heads. The incident report glowed on the main screen behind him. Incident type, educational demonstration. Threat level, revised upward. Subject classification, Palus Catus, domestic. The dean had to balance genuine educational breakthrough against very real panic responses. The university's insurance carriers were already asking questions about liability coverage for domesticated apex predators. His mandibles worked slowly as he outlined the new protocols. Every animal demonstration now required pre-approval from both the xenobiology and security departments. No exceptions. Mandatory behavioral briefings became standard for any species presentation. Not just the obvious dangerous ones, every species. Because the Mittens incident proved that appearance meant nothing, the most dangerous creatures might look completely harmless. Faculty would now need to complete certification programs on recognizing concealed predatory traits. The liability waiver forms got interesting additions. Right between venomous species and electrically charged organisms appeared new checkboxes for deceptively harmless appearance and domesticated terrestrial predators. The legal department had worked through the night drafting language that specifically mentioned Earth felines, while leaving room for whatever other surprises humanity might domesticate next. One classroom demonstration had accomplished what decades of diplomatic effort couldn't. It proved human cleverness extended beyond technology into biological management. Their relationship with danger wasn't accidental. It was engineered. The galaxy had assumed humans stumbled into their predator partnerships through luck or foolishness. The Mittens demonstration revealed calculated mutual benefit spanning thousands of years. The perception shift affected interstellar relations beyond academic circles. Trade negotiations now included considerations of human risk assessment capabilities. Cultural exchange programs added predator management workshops. Military strategists studied feline hunting techniques for tactical applications. Every field found something to learn from how humans handled creatures that could kill with 96% efficiency. Humanity's place in the galactic community changed that day. They were no longer the newcomers who took dangerous chances. They were the species that turned danger into advantage. The demonstration proved that sometimes the most revolutionary scientific insights come not from complex equations or advanced technology, but from observing simple truths hiding in plain sight. Sometimes the most advanced predator management system looks like a food bowl and a scratching post. Jake Martinez completed his journey from exchange student to scientific revolutionary in exactly 19 minutes. The transition wasn't gradual. It happened somewhere between the moment Mittens extended her claws and the moment the security team holstered their weapons. He'd faced institutional skepticism that would have crushed most graduate students, potential academic consequences that could have ended his university standing, and the weight of representing an entire planet's ecological strategy. His bold move worked because he brought evidence instead of argument. He didn't challenge Professor Clix with theories or debates. He brought a living demonstration that spoke for itself. The data did the talking. The predator performed the convincing. Jake simply provided the context that transformed terror into education. Professor Clix evolved from antagonist to colleague in real time. His initial dismissal gave way to fascination, then respect, then active collaboration. The professor who'd once questioned Jake's credentials now consulted him on curriculum revisions. Their relationship became something rare in academia, a genuine meeting of minds across generational and species divides, forged in the crucible of a shared paradigm shift. The university administration acknowledged the value of unconventional approaches without endorsing chaos. They recognized that sometimes revolutionary science arrives messy, wrapped in orange fur and accompanied by mild panic. New policies emerged that balanced academic freedom with safety, innovation with responsibility. The incident became a case study in productive disruption. Mittens achieved legendary status while remaining completely unconcerned. Her image appeared in scientific journals and social media feeds across the sector. Researchers wrote papers about her hunting efficiency. Meme creators photoshopped her into historical scenes. She became the most famous predator in recent galactic history, and all she wanted was a sunbeam and occasional ear scratches. Jake's reputation for fortune-favored moves became scientifically validated. What some had called luck revealed itself as calculated risk-taking. His understanding of when to challenge authority, how to present evidence, and why demonstration beats debate became required reading for science communication courses. The student who'd seemed reckless now looked prescient. The hero returned to his studies with new knowledge and changed perspectives. He'd learned that institutional resistance isn't always ignorance, sometimes it's just waiting for better evidence. That the most effective challenges come not through confrontation, but through demonstration. That sometimes you need to show people what they're missing rather than tell them they're wrong. The resolution settled over the galactic academic community with quiet finality. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from following established paths, but from questioning why those paths exist. Progress often requires someone willing to say what if when everyone else is saying because. The twist hero succeeded by packaging truth in unexpected wrapping. He didn't arrive with charts and graphs alone. He arrived with a pet carrier and a predator that looked like a stuffed toy. The combination of solid data and dramatic demonstration proved irresistible. The universe expected a revolutionary to come bearing manifestos. Instead, one arrived bearing cat treats. The journey completed where all proper scientific revolutions should, not with triumph over opponents, but with collective advancement. The professor gained new understanding. The students gained new perspective. The university gained new protocols. And galactic science gained a more complete picture of predation, efficiency, and the species brave enough to keep perfection as a pet. Sometimes changing everything requires just one person willing to bring a better truth to class. And sometimes that truth has whiskers and retractable claws. Humanity's greatest strength isn't dodging danger, it's making friends with it. We build bonds with predators, safe spaces with claws, turning threat into ally through sheer stubborn trust. True cleverness means looking past appearances. The deadliest hunters often look harmless. Understanding beats fear every time. The galaxy has monsters that roar and rage and rattle the stars. Earth has Mittens, small fluffy napping in sunbeams, 96% success rate when hunting. If that doesn't terrify and amaze you, nothing will. Sometimes the universe's wonders hide in the smallest, softest packages. Professor Clicks found himself on the policy drafting committee. The irony wasn't lost on him, the skeptic becoming the expert. His detailed notes from the demonstration became the foundation for the new predator assessment guidelines. He insisted on including the efficiency metrics, the concealed weaponry analysis, and particularly the psychological aspects of surplus killing behavior. The policies didn't stay confined to one university. Within cycles, the new guidelines spread through academic networks across the sector. Other institutions read the incident reports and immediately updated their own protocols. The Galactics. University standards became the benchmark for predator handling everywhere. Nobody wanted to be the next campus to mobilize security teams for a Housecat. Mittens became the official measuring stick for danger assessment. Is it Mittens level deceptive? Entered the academic lexicon. Security teams now trained with images of fluffy animals instead of obvious monsters. The concept that true danger often hid in plain sight changed how everyone viewed biological presentations. The resolution was both simple and profound. Galactic academia had to evolve its safety protocols to account for humanity's unique relationship with danger. Other species avoided predators. Humans domesticated them. Other cultures built walls against threats. Humanity invited them onto their furniture. This required a complete rethinking of risk assessment. Policy had to accommodate a species that saw lethal efficiency as a household feature rather than a reason for alarm. The new guidelines accounted for this psychological disconnect. They created systems that acknowledged humanity's casual approach to danger while protecting those who hadn't evolved alongside perfect predators. One orange Housecat had done what decades of safety reviews couldn't. She'd forced galactic institutions to recognize that the most effective dangers weren't the obvious ones. They were the ones you'd never see coming until they were tapping your tentacle with concealed claws. The policies that emerged weren't just rules, they were a fundamental acknowledgement that appearance meant nothing and efficiency meant everything. Mittens padded back into her carrier when Jake opened the door. She circled twice inside the confined space, then settled into a perfect loaf position, her orange fur fluffed against the plastic sides. Her eyes closed, her breathing slowed. She looked exactly like a cat napping in a carrier, which she was, except this particular cat had just rewritten galactic predator science. The campus blog broke the story within minutes. Headlines alternated between sensational and incredulous. Terror in lecture hall appeared right above Professor Schooled by Housepet. The articles documented everything from the security response to the statistical revelations. Comment sections filled with disbelief, academic debate, and mounting anxiety about Earth's ecological profile. Jake Martinez woke up the next morning to find himself unexpectedly famous. Interview requests piled up from scientific journals and popular media outlets. His class attendance became standing room only as students from other departments crowded in to see the human who'd challenged xenobiology's foundations. His casual confidence during the demonstration became legendary. People quoted his statistical assertions in hallway conversations. Mittens became a meme phenomenon. Someone photoshopped her face onto famous predators from galactic history. Another meme showed her hidden claws with captions about concealed talents. The most popular one featured her napping with the text, "I could kill you, but I'm too busy with this sunbeam." Her image spread across social networks faster than any academic paper ever could. Professor Clicks found himself giving interviews to xenobiology journals he'd previously only read. His initial skepticism became part of the story's appeal, the established expert humbled by evidence. He handled the attention with grace, acknowledging the educational value while still looking slightly traumatized by the memory of 18 retractable blades emerging from fluffy paws. The event shifted perceptions beyond academic circles. Predators were no longer just monsters to be feared or avoided. They could be small. They could be efficient. They could be living on your sofa. Humanity's reputation shifted from reckless newcomers to species that domesticates perfection. Other races began reconsidering their own relationships with potentially dangerous species. The betting pool paid out surprisingly well for the few who'd guessed small Earth mammal. The winner was a quiet statistics major who'd calculated probability curves based on human behavior patterns. Their winnings amounted to more than a semester's tuition, proving that sometimes academic knowledge actually paid off. Security teams gained new respect for apparently harmless creatures. Their training simulations now included scenarios with deceptively calm animals that might conceal extraordinary capabilities. The team leader who'd initially holstered his weapon in frustration became something of an expert on Earth fauna, giving lectures to other security forces about appearance-based risk assessment. A housecat became the most famous predator in recent memory. Her image appeared in textbooks. Her statistics were cited in research papers. Her methodology became required study for predator behavior courses, all without ever realizing she'd done anything more than take a particularly interesting nap in a new location. Scientific fame, it turned out, didn't always come from careful laboratory work or decades of field research. Sometimes it came from one bold demonstration that challenged everything everyone thought they knew. The most revolutionary discoveries often arrived in the most unexpected packages, like a standard pet carrier containing orange fur and concealed claws. The galaxy now knew Earth's secret. The most dangerous predator wasn't the one that roared loudest. It was the one that purred while maintaining a 96% success rate. And humanity kept them as pets. That said more about humans than any diplomatic briefing ever could. The question hung in the air long after the demonstration ended. Why would any species willingly invite such efficient killers into their homes? Jake watched the alien faces process the cognitive dissonance, their various features arranged in expressions of pure bafflement. The concept of predator domestication clearly didn't compute for most civilizations. He began with ancient history, painting a picture of early human settlements, grain storage, food preservation, rodent problems that threatened survival itself. "We didn't domesticate them because we wanted pets," he explained. "We domesticated them because they solved a critical problem. They protected our food supplies with relentless efficiency. One good mouser could save a village from starvation." The mutual benefit relationship unfolded over thousands of years. Humans provided shelter, consistent food sources, and protection from larger predators. Cats provided perfect pest control. The arrangement wasn't based on emotion initially. It was practical. Evolutionary advantage through partnership. Two species finding common ground despite their different natures. Alien students exchanged glances that needed no translation. Their species avoided predators, built barriers, developed deterrents. The idea of forming working relationships with lethal creatures seemed incomprehensible, reckless even. Yet the evidence sat washing its paws in a sunbeam, completely unconcerned by the philosophical debate it had sparked. Professor Click's mandibles worked thoughtfully. This represents interspecies diplomacy on an evolutionary scale, not just coexistence but active collaboration between predator and potential prey. His antennae twitched as he accessed historical databases. No other species in recorded history has achieved such a balanced predatory partnership. The evolutionary advantages became clearer with each revelation. Humans gained protectors for their food sources. Cats gained safe territory and reliable sustenance. Both species thrived because of the arrangement. The relationship refined the hunting skills too. Cats, living with humans, maintained their efficiency without the constant pressure of starvation driving their actions. Mittens chose that moment to leap onto Jake's shoulder, purring loudly as she rubbed against his cheek. The sound vibrated through the quiet room, a low rumble of contentment from a creature that could kill with 96% efficiency. She looked completely at peace, her claws carefully sheathed, her movements gentle. The contrast between capability and behavior was startling. The resolution settled over the classroom like a physical weight. Humanity's willingness to live alongside danger wasn't foolishness. It was strategic adaptation. Their comfort with risk enabled partnerships other species would never attempt. This alliance demonstrated a unique evolutionary path where danger became asset, where threat became companion. This tolerance for calculated risk might explain humanity's rapid expansion across the stars. While other species moved cautiously, assessing every potential threat, humans simply adapted to them, domesticated them, turned predators into partners. The galaxy had viewed this as recklessness. Now it looked more like sophisticated risk management. The human-predator alliance demonstrated something fundamental about the species. They didn't eliminate danger. They mastered it through relationships. They didn't build walls against threats. They invited them inside and offered treats. This approach to risk and adaptation might be humanity's greatest strength, and until now, nobody in the galaxy had fully appreciated its implications. One small predator purring on a human shoulder represented thousands of years of evolutionary cooperation. The most efficient killer in the universe had become humanity's partner through mutual benefit. And that said more about human cleverness than any technological achievement ever could. The door to Jake's quarters hissed shut, sealing away the academic uproar and campus chaos. Inside, the only sounds were the hum of environmental systems and the soft patter of Mittens' paws on the floor plating. The contrast between the lecture hall frenzy and this domestic calm felt almost surreal. One moment they'd been at the center of a galactic academic incident. The next they were back in a standard student apartment with a half-finished nutrient pack on the counter. Mittens jumped onto the sofa, circled twice, and settled onto Jake's lap as he sat down. Her purr started almost immediately, a deep rumbling vibration that felt completely at odds with the predator that had terrorized a room full of alien scholars hours earlier. She kneaded his leg with her paws, claws carefully sheathed, expressing pure contentment. The same paws that had extended 18 retractable blades now made gentle biscuits on his trousers. Jake activated the comm unit and called his sister back on Earth. Her face appeared on screen, slightly pixelated across the interstellar distance. "You will not believe the day I just had," he began, rubbing behind Mittens' ears. The cat leaned into the touch, purr intensifying. He recounted the entire event while Mittens dozed on his lap. The security mobilization, the professor's skepticism, the statistical reveal, the classroom becoming a hunting ground. His sister listened with increasing amusement, her laughter echoing through the small quarters. "So Mittens is famous across the galaxy now?" she asked between giggles. "Infamous," Jake corrected, watching the cat sleep. "She performed perfectly. Better than perfectly, really." The efficiency demonstration was convincing. The ordinary domestic scene belied the day's events completely. Here was the universe's most efficient predator, now snoozing peacefully while Jake scratched her favorite spot. Her breathing slowed into sleep rhythms, completely relaxed. The inscrutable feline expression suggested either profound peace or universal smugness. Probably both. Jake realized that being Earth's unofficial predator ambassador was exhausting work. Defending humanity's relationship with dangerous creatures required both scientific precision and psychological fortitude. The galaxy viewed cats as monsters. Humans viewed them as companions. Bridging that cognitive gap took energy. Mittens stretched in her sleep, extending one paw toward Jake's data pad. Her claws emerged briefly, then retracted. Even unconscious, the weapon system remained operational. The duality was perfect. Lethal capability and domestic peace existing simultaneously in one small package. The most efficient killer in the known universe had one primary desire after rewriting galactic xenobiology: a good nap. Danger and domesticity weren't opposites for felines, they were integrated states. The same creature that could achieve 96% hunt success rates also appreciated warm laps and ear scratches. Jack finished his call and leaned back, watching Mittens sleep. The purring had softened to almost inaudible levels. Her whiskers twitched with dream movements. Somewhere out there, academic papers were being rewritten, safety protocols updated, and betting pools settled. Here in this quiet room, the revolutionary predator simply slept, completely unconcerned with her newfound fame. The contrast between cosmic impact and personal peace was typically feline. The galaxy might see a perfect killer. Jake saw a cat who'd had a very busy day and deserved her rest. News of the demonstration traveled through academic circles with the quiet persistence of a viral gene sequence. What began as campus gossip became peer-reviewed fascination. Xenobiology departments across the galaxy received the data packets with varying degrees of skepticism that gradually shifted toward reluctant acceptance. The numbers didn't lie. The footage didn't deceive. Earth's domesticated predators required serious scientific reconsideration. Galactic risk assessment profiles underwent immediate revision. Humanity's file expanded beyond technologically rapid developers to include advanced predator management specialists. Species that had viewed humans as reckless newcomers now saw calculated daring. Bringing perfect killers into your home wasn't foolishness, it was strategic coevolution. The psychological profile shifted from risk-tolerant to risk-adaptive. Professor Clicks found himself incorporating human-feline relationships into his revised curriculum. His new lesson plans included chapters on domestic predator partnerships and the evolutionary advantages of interspecies cooperation. The university approved the changes without debate. The demonstration had been too compelling to ignore. Other institutions requested the lecture footage for their own studies, and Clicks provided it with meticulous annotations. Human exchange students noticed the shift immediately. Where they'd once faced polite curiosity about Earth's primitive ecosystems, they now faced serious questions about predator domestication practices. Their casual mentions of family pets drew intense academic interest. A student mentioning their childhood cat might find themselves interviewed by xenobiology grad students within hours. The incident became required study in introductory xenobiology courses across 7 major systems. First-year students now analyzed Mittens' hunting efficiency metrics alongside traditional predator case studies. Exam questions included essays on the advantages of concealed weaponry versus obvious armament. The academic consensus shifted from viewing humanity as anomaly to viewing them as case study and alternative evolutionary strategy. The resolutions settled across galactic scientific communities with definitive clarity. Humanity's reputation transformed from recklessly bold to strategically innovative. Their ability to manage perfect predators suggested cognitive flexibility other species lacked. Where most civilizations built walls against danger, humans built relationships with it. This represented sophisticated environmental adaptation rather than primitive risk-taking.